In this moment with Jesus, it's not just about forgiveness. It's not just the fact that he rescued her from being stoned to death. He gave her a brand new life. Go. Live. Just don't live like you have been. In the middle of this celebration, in the middle of this yearly tradition, Jesus reframes and redefines some things that are very important for us. And one of the things that Jesus redefined was how our thirst is quenched. How our thirst is quenched. And let me explain that. Again, during the Feast of Tabernacles, right? The priest would go, he'd take this pitcher, get the water out of the pool of Siloam, go back to the temple and pour it out. And there was significance to that. And there would be hundreds, maybe thousands of people that would participate in that ritual. But here's what Jesus did in John chapter 7, beginning verse 37, going through verse 38. It says, on the last and greatest day of the festival, Jesus stood and said in a loud voice, let anyone who is thirsty come to me and drink. Whoever believes in me, as Scripture has said, rivers of living water will flow from within them. It's quite possible that Jesus is either near where this water is being poured out, or he's watching the procession go by, and he just calls out and just says, you want to know about water? Let me tell you about water. As great as the water from the pool was, and as huge a celebration as this feast was, you're going to get thirsty again. That water is going to be poured out. That water is going to dry up. And you're going to have this thirst in your life again, and we're going to have to go through the same process again next year. But not if you come to me. I'll give you living water that never runs dry. And John goes on to explain there in his writings that Jesus is talking about the Holy Spirit. That Jesus would provide his Spirit to live in us, that we constantly have this source of life, that we constantly have this source of meaning and purpose and fulfillment when we have our connection with Jesus and we have his Spirit living in us. Jesus redefined how our thirst is quenched. The things that we chase for in life, the things that we look to find and give us fulfillment and meaning and purpose. And we hope if I just have this, my hunger will be satisfied. I'm pursuing this. And if I just get this job promotion, if I'm just friends with these people, if I just have this possession, if I just live in this neighborhood, and we're constantly trying to feed ourselves. We're constantly thirsting after these different things. And Jesus is like, I can quench your thirst. Come to me. And I will give you something where you don't chase after those things that can never fill you, that can never satisfy you. Jesus also redefined where our true light comes from. You had these huge lampstands that were so bright and illuminated the city in such a powerful way. But you know what would eventually happen? The oil runs out. The light diminishes. At the end of the festival, they put those lampstands away. Jesus in John, go to the next chapter, in John chapter 8 and verse 12. John says, when Jesus spoke to the people, he said, I am the light, not of Jerusalem. I am the light of what? The world. Whoever follows me will never walk in darkness, but will have the light of life. Here's Jesus again going, look, this light is amazing. It's bright. It's brighter now than it would ever be any other night in Jerusalem. But guess what? It's going to get dark again. But not if you have me in your life. Not if you're connected with me. I am the light of the world. And of all the things that Satan puts in our lives that fill us with darkness, of all the fears that we have, the anxieties that we have, the sin that creates guilt and causes us to feel like we're just fumbling through the dark, Jesus says, I will not just give you light, I am light. I'm the source of it. You don't have to stumble through the darkness of confusion and doubt and guilt and addiction and anger anymore. Because you got me. And in the middle of those two things, in the middle of redefining how we quench our thirst, in the middle of redefining Where our true light comes from, Jesus also redefines forgiveness, because one of the stories that we find in between those two different things that Jesus says is a story at the beginning of John chapter 8, where a woman is brought to Jesus in the temple area who has been caught in the act of adultery. And these religious leaders bring her to Jesus and they say, hey, the law says we should stone her to death. She deserves to die. What do you say? And they couldn't care less about this woman. They're only using this as a trap for Jesus. Because they know Jesus is about forgiveness and about acceptance and about giving second chances. And so they're hoping that he'll say, well, we need to forgive her. And they're going to be like, ah, ha, ha. You're not really from God, because God says that that she deserves to die. And if Jesus happens to say, you're right, the law says she deserves to die, then they're going to be like, ha, ha. All this talk about grace and forgiveness and acceptance, that's all a hoax. What do you say, Jesus? Jesus doesn't say anything for a minute. He bends down the ground and starts drawing with his finger in the dirt. And there's all sorts of theories about what he was writing about, what he was drawing. I don't think that's the point of the story. It just irritated these religious leaders. They're waiting. We want the answer. Tell us now. What do you think? And Jesus finally says, you're right. That's what the law says. So I tell you what. Whichever one of you is completely perfect, completely sinless, has never made a mistake in your life, you be the one to throw the first stone. One by one, these guys walk away. Jesus is now by himself with this woman, who has probably been cowering in fear, waiting for the rocks to start raining down on her, who is probably full of shame and regret and just can't even lift her face to see her accusers. She's probably got her head wrapped and is just crouching down and just wishing, maybe even wishing for the death that people say she deserves. And Jesus says, woman, where's your accusers? Is there anybody here to condemn you? And in that moment, she looks up, she looks around. No one's there. It's just her and the loving eyes of this man that seems to see her for who she really is. He says, no, there's no one here. And look at what Jesus says in John chapter 8 and verse 11. Then neither do I condemn you. Now go and leave your life of sin. It's not that she was innocent. She wasn't. It's not that even the religious leaders that Jesus was having this conversation with didn't have any concept of forgiveness. They did. But in their mindset, forgiveness was you had to earn it. If I'm going to receive forgiveness, I've got to sacrifice, and I've got to give, and I've got to beg, and I've got to hope and plead and jump through a whole bunch of hoops and do a whole bunch of things. Then maybe this other person who has every right to inflict whatever punishment they want on me, maybe they'll forgive me and not do that hurtful thing to me. That's what forgiveness is all about. And Jesus in this moment redefines it. Because in this moment with Jesus, it's not just about forgiveness. It's not just the fact that he rescued her from being stoned to death. He gave her a brand new life. Go. Live. Just don't live like you have been. Folks, that's not just forgiveness. That's grace. And that's what Jesus gives.